If we can go to Matthew. We'll pick up where we left off last week from Matthew chapter 6. Just one verse for now. Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. From the King James Version states, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Amen. You may be seated. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I would encourage you, because there's quite a few scriptures I want to share with you today. The challenges was trying to limit it in this for the sake of time. So what I will do is I'll call out scriptures. If you could record it on a piece of paper or your personal device. That you may refer and double check the authenticity of what I said later. I would appreciate that. But I would also challenge you to study it. I was this week, I typically am a fan of YouTube. I'm not a fan, I'm a follower of YouTube. And while on YouTube, I was listening to a well-renowned preacher that you and I happen to revere and love. And I listened to him cite like maybe 3 or 4 scriptures. And 2 of those, typically, we would take we good. 2 out of the 3 or 4 that he shared, the scriptures, they didn't post it on the screen. He just quoted them, and they took his word for it. Now, I pray that some people were writing it down as they were listening. But what I decided to do is click pause and to review what he had quoted. And when I looked at what he had quoted, it had nothing to do with what he was saying. And I was astonished. And I think I was astonished because of his notoriety and his popularity, that you just assume that they are accurate. But I would say this, no matter who quotes anything, always look at it for yourself. So I am challenging you to even challenge me. That if I say, most of the time you will correct me. You guys don't have a problem correcting me when I'm wrong. But if you hear me cite a scripture that is inaccurate, I would certainly invite you to correct me so that we're not thinking that it says one thing when it's something else. Okay? Okay. So last week we started with Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And we talked about the importance of making sure that our hearts are right with God. That we've typically thought that in the area of stewardship, when it comes to money, that it's one of those subjects that are taboo. But out of all of the subjects that are discussed in the Bible, from righteousness to sin, heaven and hell, forgiveness, faith, you name it, the top subject that is discussed from beginning to end is the matter that deals with finances, deals with money. And it's not just in this culture now that it has captured our hearts and hijacked our souls. But this is something that has been going on from the very beginning of time. And the real issue, as I stated last week, when it comes to money, biblically speaking, it's not about dollars and cents. We make it about dollars and cents. But at its core, it's really about where your heart is. So when it comes to finances, it's centered around your heart, not a dollar amount. It's the heart. It is the resistance and the nature that we wrestle with, the sinful nature that we wrestle with, that is bent towards disobeying God, that exacerbates this over any issue that we deal with. Primarily because this area really is not ours. We manage it, but don't own it. But our flesh has deceived us into thinking that what I have access to is really mine for me to make a decision with. I am more reluctant to release my grips off of money than I am my own body. Some people are more cavalier with their body than they are their wallets. Of which neither belongs to you. Your temple or your treasure. And to us who have not saved ourselves to the day of matrimony, we have given and shared God's temple and given access and entry to people who didn't qualify entrance at all. And we treated it very cavalier. I am reluctant, though, to share access and entry when it comes to money, because I think that's mine. That's the one area out of all the areas that we deal with, out of all the commandments that we have to face, that's the one area that grips our heart the most. The rules change when it comes to spirituality. Again, when it comes to observing how we manage as a steward what belongs to God, what is already His. The dynamics change when it comes to spirituality. It's not until we see it from a spiritual perspective when I am challenged and every figure and every percentage is exacerbated. If I say we are renovating the sanctuary, we are willing to give these TVs away for $100. The person who sits there and says, I have nothing to give, will miraculously come with 100. Miraculously. I could say, let's give. I need X amount of people to give $100. I ain't got that. But if someone says you can have this for 100, I promise you, even though you have TVs already in your house, you'll find a way to retrieve it. And that's not going to the ATM. You'll get it before you can get out this door. It'll come. And it's not until we start talking about tithe that we feel uncomfortable. The heart rate increases. People begin to wheeze and become asthmatic. Because if I say anything about money, Why the deep sigh? Because it's a heart issue. It's not about money. It's a heart issue. So much so that the first commandment that God gives to Moses to give to the people is that there should not be any other gods before me. And that's the one that fights for the same throne that should be God's. So this is why there's an enormous amount of discussion around this topic throughout the Bible. Not just one time. This is why it's more discussed than any other passage, because this is the one that grips humanity's heart the most. People have died over money. We've started wars to acquire more money, more wealth. Friendships has dissolved. Not over 2,000. I mean, we ain't loaning our friends thousands of dollars. I mean, there's been more friendships that have broken up less than $20 than R&B singers from the 80s and 90s. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to sever friendships over money. For couples who've dreamed of spending the rest of their life together, and all they can think about months ahead is getting to the altar. But when they have to combine bank accounts, and one of them is not a good steward and one is, and one continuously mismanages the other versus resources, it moves from being a place of bliss to a place of burden. And now there's no longer thoughts of how it was at the altar, but how fast we can get to the court for the divorce. Interesting dynamic, Roxanne, that out of all of the couples that get married in the United States, just from 2018, half will find themselves in divorce within 4 years. Half. So if you get 1 million people in America who get married in 2018, do you know 500,000 of them will end up in divorce? Not because the man was cheating or not because the woman was cheating. It's because of money issues. The number one cause for divorce in America, the heartbeat that causes people when they stand at the altar, I will love you. Will you love me? I'll love you. I'll love you. I promise to love you with all my heart. For sickness and health, for better or for worse, for richer, through death do us part. You know I ain't say for poor. Now they'll say it because it's rote, because it's something that we say at the altar, but we don't mean for poor. We don't mean for poor, because when it hits the for poorer part, I can't do that. It fractures relationships. Most of the time that I have gotten mad at my wife, is when I look at an account and I see a charge that we hadn't discussed. Now, in theory, I would say openly, it's our money. You can do whatever you want. But then when she has the latitude to operate in that right, then it becomes a challenge for me. Because I can create tension off of a purchase. Now, if she asked me to get it, I'll try to find a way to make it happen. That's the irony. If she wants it, I'm going to try to get it. But if she makes a financial purchase without me discussing it, now we just got World War III. And we can make something that is a molehill into a mountain. And again, it's not because of money. It's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. Because it has nothing to do with the dollar and cents. What it comes down to is you didn't talk about my money. I mean, I put my money into this too. I got direct deposit coming in this to account too. You sitting there spending this. We hadn't discussed this. What if I want to do X, Y, Z? Was you going to do something? No, I wasn't going to do nothing. But it's a principle behind it. See, now outside of church, we are bent on principle. When it comes to friendships, when it comes to us loaning money to friends, I'm going to give you this. When you get paid? When you get paid? 2 weeks now? Okay, no problem. 2 weeks come, they don't give you nothing, but they tell you what they just bought. Now you get offended. Why? Because it's the principle. We appreciate principle until it becomes spirituality. Now the Bible is full of biblical principles as it relates to finances and giving. Now I don't want to deal with principles then. Now it ain't about principles. The church just want my money. Before, it wasn't about the money for you. Before, you said it was about it ain't about the money. It's about the principle of it. It's just $20. I know it's $20. It's the principle behind the $20. You should have talked to me and told me X, Y. You are arguing over principle. Now, when we raise spiritual principles to your attention, no, I don't want to hear about principle. No, it's about the money. The church wants money. The preacher wants my money. The church wants my money. Christianity is all about money. It's no longer principle. Now it's money. We are provided electricity through the building by way of Pepco in this area. I wish I could call them. I would like to set up a direct deposit of principal place. Yeah, principal won't keep Washington Gas operating in here. It takes resources to do that. It takes resources. But the real bigger issue, it's a heart issue, Roxanne. I mean, you sitting smack dab in the middle right here. That's the price for admission. You want to sit right here in the front, you're going to get looked at. All right? You ever go to a comedy show? The people on the front row, they're going to get lit up. You sit on the front row in church, you're going to get preached to. All right? You know, bring it, right. So it's a heart issue. Nowhere else is it a big issue for any other principle in the Bible, but it's just this area here that nudges at us, that eats away at us. So when it comes to tithing, as we mentioned as a recap, tithing is a tenth. And principally, God starts this principle. You see it oftentimes viewed as just starting with the law. As we would say, the Old Testament is the book of the law. So you see it dealing with Moses, but it predates the law. It starts in Genesis 14 with Abraham giving to the high priest Melchizedek. And then you also see his son, Jacob, operating in the principle of tithing in chapter 28, right? Predates the law. Then when Moses comes, God gives the law to Moses and says that tithing ought to be incorporated as a law for the people. So you see it before the law, and then when the law starts, it is a continuum. Well, we've heard people say who do not want to tithe, with anybody who don't want to do anything, they'll find a justification or a reason as to why they should not or why they cannot obey God. Some people would say, okay, well, tithing is a part of the Old Testament. We're no longer Old Testament followers or believers, therefore I don't have to observe the law. I'm a New Testament believer. But you see that tithing is discussed in the New Testament, and it was a principle that was going on for so long, they didn't have to continuously repeat the same thing over and over again as it relates to tithing because they got it. What they were pushing more is also offering and sacrificial giving, what we call grace giving. So people say, well, I'm no longer under the law, but in the New Testament, I am now under grace. And so then there's the concept of grace giving. However you want to pin yourself, we're not released from the responsibility of giving. And I think it's a part of the issue that deals with our hearts where we just don't want to do it. We just, at times, just don't want to do it. Spiritually speaking. Because again, as we repeated from last week, 10% is not a lot. That's the smallest thing that God asked us to do in Bible. That's the smallest thing. If I say to you, there is a store that has a 10% wide sale in the store, that ain't nothing. If you have a friend that works at Nordstrom's, ooh, girl, what's your discount? Oh, I get that 10% employee discount. Like, what's that? Hey. Okay. Like 10% is something. But in your mind, you thinking it ain't nothing. No one stands in line for Black Friday for a 10% sale. Black Friday wouldn't exist if merchandise was sold by merchants at 10% off. You ain't running for 10% off. You ain't budget, because you would say, it's not even worth it. That's nothing. That ain't nothing. If you've been wronged, if you have an issue with a merchant over merchandise and you want to take it back, or you want a credit for restitution of bad, poor service or product, I need a discount from this. Okay, I understand. I'm totally sorry about what you've experienced. And as a good gesture, we're going to take off 10%. What? 10%? You can do better than that. 10%? That ain't nothing from what I had to go through. 10%? Oh, no. You need to do better than 10. Now, again, we love principle outside of spirituality. Now, when it comes to spirituality, 10%, oh my, 10%, they asking for 10%. I can't afford to give 10%. Do you know what happened if I gave God 10%? I will be out. I will be homeless if I gave God 10% and I had to operate off of 90 of my check. I will suffer. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? I cannot make it off of 90% of my check. Give God 10, I will be homeless. I will be in a shelter, living out of my car, destitute. I don't know how I would make it. I may kill myself by the end of the night if I had to live off of 90% and give God 10. That is unreasonable. Yes, I understand all of it belongs to him, but no, God understands that I can keep his part. He understands I need to steal from him. Yes, it's his, but he understands and knows my heart. Why would you brag about the condition of your heart? And we do that. We disappoint God and say, well, he understands how wretched and how cold and how dark it is, and you want to brag about the condition of your heart. Well, he know how I am. He know I steal from him all the time. He gives me the ability to get this job and allow me to wake up out of my bed to go there and to acquire it. And then when he blessed me with it, I'm going to take for him, and then I'll remind him, well, you know my heart. Really? How you... So yes, Christians are the boldest out of all humanity, because this is the only entity that will be able to take from their creator and brag about it and throw it in his face and come back and ask for more after deliberately jacking him. Now, here's a place out of all the principles where God extends himself far beyond than he should, in my opinion, far more than he should. This is the only place, not when it comes to forgiveness, not when it comes to salvation, not when it comes to heaven or hell or eternity or any other principle. When it comes to the issue with money, this is the place where he says, if you don't believe me when I tell you I'm going to do my job, then just test me on it. This is the only place. And then even with a money-back guarantee, we still won't even try it. If you don't believe I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do in this area right here, I promise you I'm going to do it. Test me here. Give me a try. Evaluate me. Sit me down and tell me it's test time. Test me. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. You believe I can save you and get to your heaven, but you don't believe I'll open up the windows and pour out blessings? You believe I got enough power to save you from the clutches of hell and keep you out of a fiery furnace and burning in hell in eternity, but you don't believe I'm going to bless you when you give up 10%? You don't believe I'm going to do it? Just try me. Just prove me. Just one time. Just do it. Just do it. And we still won't. This is the only place and the only principle attached to Christian living where he says, prove me wrong. And this is the one that is not tested. This is the one that is not tested, but full of rebuttals, full of commentary from people who don't even try it. Okay, so let me start from the beginning. You can write this down. Genesis 14, verses 19 through 20. That's dealing with Abraham and tithing. That's introduced. The tithing principle is introduced. Genesis 28, verses 20 through 22. That's Jacob dealing with tithing. Then when God gives the law to Moses, he introduces it in Leviticus. Leviticus. You know, how do you spell Leviticus? Just put L-E-V. L-E-V, chapter 27, verses 30 through 34. And in this, he's talking about that the tithe is holy unto the Lord. It is set aside for sacred use. It is holy unto the Lord. It is set aside for sacred use. Then you have Numbers 18. Numbers 18, verse 21, which talks about that the tithe, now he shifts, talks about the purpose. We'll also use the tithe to take care of the priest, take care of the Levites. Those who serve you, those who labor, who's your spiritual leaders, we will use and set apart the tithe to take care of them so they can be sustained, that they give their lives to serving me and serving you. Same chapter 18, verse 26. Now let's come up for air. Here's a great debate. Some believe that the spiritual leader does not need to be supported by the church through tithes and offering. They believe that they should work. Let me ask you this, for those who feel comfortable by signifying with your hands. How comfortable are you with someone providing a level of service to you, but they do it part-time? For example, would you want a primary care physician that his life is not devoted to medicine, but he does plumbing as his full-time job? And part-time, his specialty is neurology. But he makes his money plunging in plumbing. And when he comes to evaluate you, he's coming with his plumber uniform on. And if you ever seen a plumber, their jeans kind of come right here, and there's always this crack. Have you ever seen somebody work on your sink or it's mandatory gear with the tube belt. Tube belt. How would you feel? You shaking your head, but it's true. You should have been on the front row, right? It's the principle, right? It's the principle, right? How comfortable are you? How comfortable are you? Someone working on your car, their full-time job is an accountant, but every now and then they work on cars, and when your car is smoking, how confident are you to entrust your vehicle for somebody who has the time to just squeeze it in? I mean, just something to think about. God says, I have set aside people who have my heart to spiritually lead you, who will be pushed to devote their lives to serve you. And as a result, one of the things that I don't want them to have anxiety about is where they're going to sleep and what they're going to eat, because they give their lives to serve you. And when it comes to serving you at your most vulnerable, depressed, worst moments, I don't want them rushing from another place or another job or vocation to tend to you. You have their full attention and energy. You know what kind of hurts me? is that when I have to go see people in the hospital, I'm already tired. When I walk in, I look more tired than the person who's on the gurney. That's enough to say about that. But one of the things that I appreciate for me is that when I need my pastor, he is refreshed, he's energized, and he's able to pour into me because I'm not a competing factor. But any given time of the day I need him, he'll come running. It hurts me when I have to say to somebody, let me see if I can get off. And then if they say, yeah, then I'll see if I can try to meet you. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard your phone ring and see the name Greg Gillison pop up. But if he can't get you, he's going to keep calling back. It hurts me to be able to take up the phone and say, hey, is everything okay? Well, I'm in a meeting, or I'm at work right now. I can't talk. And I have to say I got to call him back. Because now I'm just postponing whatever is important to him in that moment. That's enough to say about that. So when you see the pattern of Scripture, the children of Israel stopped giving. They start saying, you know what? Our priests, they need to get out here and work like us. But then their spiritual condition started to deteriorate. When their loved ones passed away, the priest wasn't available to do the funerals. Oh, it became an issue there. When the loved one's sick, it became an issue. I received a call. I was just telling James, I received a call from someone on Friday. They say, I don't know if you heard, my dad is in the hospital. He's sick. They said he only has but maybe 2 or 3 days max, and he's gone. If you can you come by and make it? I said, I can't come right now. I'm actually at work right now. But my intent was to try to come today. He passed that same night. You know the last impression I left with that family member? I'm at work. I gotta work. That's more important right now than your crisis. As a spiritual leader, that's my because I gotta take care of my family. That's more important than your crisis. And it's not really an issue until it hits your home. Yeah. So there's this false impression that has been created, this narrative that has been created by those who don't even go to church at all, that all we want is your money, that all we want is just to take from you. And that's not even the case. Has there been people who have mishandled God's resources? Absolutely. But that's less than 1% of all the churches in the United States. And all it takes is just a few that creates this narrative where those who don't want to come already use that as a platform not to come, or when they come, not to give. But then require as much of the services as they can from the church, to draw from the church as much as they can, but never give anything to sustain it. The church doesn't sustain itself. It has to be moved and furthered and advanced by those who sow into it. That's the only way how it's going to work. These lights are not powered by batteries. And even if they were, batteries ain't free. For every food function that we have, how many times we've charged for people to come here for a food function, whether it's for the men's ministry, women's ministry, how many times have we charged? For the couples ministry, how many times have we charged for any food function? 0. How many people are in your house, and then how much is that grocery bill? Now imagine when you got a plan for 50 people. What does that look like? You know what I mean? So it takes money to do, and that's just eating. But what if we want to do ministry expanding beyond the door, doing something outside? It requires finances to make that happen. And it doesn't just happen by osmosis. It's by the generosity of people sowing into God's work that blesses people. And let me just say this is one part of notes, but let me just throw this in because I was actually sharing this last week with some good friends of mine. And that is, if every person just did the minimum, which is tithing, if everyone tithed, then there wouldn't be no need for churches to do a building fund. If everyone just tithed, if everyone just gave a tenth. And again, we're so programmed, we give more than 10% every time money comes out of our pocket. So again, for every purchase you make in a restaurant, 5%, 6%, 10%, carry out 10% in DC, 6% Maryland. Every time you make a purchase, you buy gas, it's taxed. You buy a stick of gum, it's taxed. You buy some jeans, it's taxed. You go to the grocery store, it's taxed. Even though you already got taxed on the front end due to direct deposit, you're constantly being taxed over and over again. And it's not problematic for you. When God says, let's do 10, then it's a problem. Because then it's no longer about principle, it's about the money. And you've made it about the money. But it really reveals the complexion of your heart. All right? So let me share something which is just going to remind you of this. Number one, that the money does not belong to me. Everything that I have anyway, that I have access to, belongs to God. The other scripture for tithing in Deuteronomy 12, 5, and 6. Tithing was also orchestrated and used to be a blessing to those who were orphans and widows, and those who were also foreigners. You see that also in Deuteronomy 12. Then you also see the principle of tithing, which is the most popular in Malachi. That's also in Nehemiah. You see it also in Amos, but also in Malachi 3, verses 8 and 9. 3 points to consider. What is the complexion of my heart? Is it a heart of service? Is my heart a heart of service? Number 2, is it a heart of sacrifice? Or 3, is it a heart of selfishness? Is it a heart, number 1, a heart of service? 2, a heart of sacrifice? Or 3, a heart of selfishness? Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 5 real quick. Matthew 5, 38. When it comes, Matthew 5, 38. When it comes to giving, I need to remind myself of what Colossians would say, that whatever you do in word or deed, you do it all in the name of the Lord. That I keep focus that the recipient of everything that comes from me is toward Christ. That becomes the deciding factor of my perspective. That I'm not doing XYZ for the recipient. I am doing it out of the basis of who Christ is in my life. Colossians says, all that you do in word or in deed, do it in the name of the Lord. So no matter what it is I'm doing, if I'm doing it as unto the Lord, that guides my activity. That changes everything. If I'm in front of Jesus right now, that changes how I respond. It changes my attitude. It changes my posture. It changes everything. If I am filtering it with everything that I do it in word and in deed in the name of the Lord. With understanding that if someone on the street asks me for some change, if I'm no longer, let's entertain the principle, as people say, I am no longer under the law in the Old Testament, I am now under grace. Therefore, because I am no longer under the law, I don't have to tithe. I don't have to do what the law say. Well, let me challenge that. Have anybody ever heard that principle before? Have you ever heard somebody say, you don't have to tithe because that's a part of the law, that's part of the Old Testament? If you heard that, let me see your hand. Okay. So then, if that's a part of the law, and that's Old Testament, thou shalt not kill. That's in the law too. So I guess we can just kill now. I don't got to observe that either. So is lying. I guess I can lie now because I'm under grace. See, when people throw stuff out to excuse them from other, it just don't make any kind of sense at all. I don't have to do it because in the Old Testament, honor the Lord with all of your heart. Love him with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your being, and everything that is within you. That's in the Old Testament. That's law. Now, if you're saying I'm under grace, there is even much more required out of you than it was even the law had asked for. So if you're thinking, oh, the law was hard, grace pushes you to go even further than you would have even in the law. Much more is expected out of you when you operate under the umbrella of grace. So then, if I'm operating, let me show you this principle. So, here, we'll pretend this is $1 bill. If you can come and be my example real quick. Yes, if you can come and be my example real quick. Thank you for your swiftness and your expediency. Okay? The little girl who turned 10 years old for her birthday, because she's 10, someone gave her $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10. Right? You ever gave somebody a number of ones based upon their birthday? Okay, so the little girl says, because she's been taught and raised by her parents, who are devout Christians, that whatever we get from the Lord, whatever we receive as a gift from the Lord, to honor him, we give him back first fruits. So we always take a tenth out. So out of the 10 ones you got, we'll give one to the Lord. Well, he decided what he was going to do with dollar number 2. That was going to be for, she decided she was going to do like baby dolls, like $2, $3, some bubble gum, some chips, and then $4, $5. She said she was going to do X, Y, Z, $6, $7, $8. And then on that $9th, she decided she was going to give that to Jesus. Well, Mama says, well, you already gave this one to Jesus. You don't have to do this one. She says, yes, I'm going to do this one. This one was already his, but this one is a gift to him. Thank you. That's the definition of grace. That's the definition of grace giving. So it's not just what I owe God, but it's also extending myself to sow a gift to him. One of these already belonged to him, but this one is also my gift to him. So this is what I wanted to show you, how grace operates principally, since you're so into principle. Since you're so into principle. 5:38. You have heard it being said that an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, by grace, operating under the principle of grace, since you love grace, turn the other cheek and let them have that one too. Verse 40. Y'all like, All right, now verse 40. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, they want to take away your outfit. They suing you for your clothes on your back. Jesus says if they want to have that, also let him have your cloak as well. Go a step further. Since we operate in grace, grace always goes a step further. They want your tunic. Not only give them your tunic, but also give them your coat. Not just any old coat, your best coat. Yeah, always. That's grace. All right? Whoever, here we go, next verse, let's go down. 41, whoever compels you to go 1 mile, here goes grace, go with him how many? 2. That's grace. Law would have said, I done 1 and that's all I'm going to do. But grace says, I'll go 1 and I'll go an extra 1 with you, even if you ain't asked me to. I'll do what you didn't even require out of me. That's grace. That's grace. All right? Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Someone is asking of you, grace says, give it to him. And if the person want to borrow from you, don't be like, nah, I can't give you nothing. You ain't trustworthy. That's grace. That's grace. I thought that part y'all was going to be like shouting, and I thought you was going to be like, It's something about like, doing unto, y'all didn't shout off that. No. I thought that was going to be like the best part. I'm like, they're going to get electrified off of this. This is the part where they're going to be like knocking down chairs. And when I start talking about giving away your stuff and doing above and beyond in grace, I was like, I'm going to kill it with this part right here. It was just not kind of happy. Yeah, I did kill it, didn't I? I did kill it. I did. I killed it with that one. I killed it with that one. All right, let me say this. Let me say this. I'll wrap this up, and we'll pick up next week, because I want to show you something really interesting. Acts 20:35. Acts 20:35. You don't have to go there. Just write it, and then you can go back and verify if I'm accurate. Acts 20:35. They were referring to the words of Jesus. When it comes to the disposition of your heart, the person, Jesus says, it is more blessed to give than it is to be a receiver. It's more. You're more blessed as the giver than as the receiver. A worldly, fleshy mentality thinks, no, I'm more blessed to receive and to take than it is to release. Jesus says you're more blessed when you give than it is when you take. And I'll principally share with you what that looks like next week. All right? All right, let's bow our heads.